Hey guys, what's up? It's Biscuitboo Horror Reviews, and I'm here with a review of an, I guess, Soviet horror film from 1967, um, based on a novella that was previously, before this film came out, adapted by Mario Bava as Black Sunday, which is a very cool, like early '60s Italian kind of supernatural occult horror film. The movie I'm talking about tonight is called V. It's spelled VIY. I'm hoping that that is how it's pronounced, although I could very well be wrong in that regard. Either way, this movie has an upcoming Blu-ray release from Severin Films. They released it as like an exclusive to their Black Friday, to their halfway to Black Friday sale they had like a week after Vinegar Syndrome had their sale. And because it was a week, just a week after the Vinegar Syndrome sale, I missed out on their sale. I did want to grab that Blu-ray release of V as well as a couple other items, but I was completely fucking hit on spare cash at the moment, so I couldn't get it. So I missed out on the Blu-ray release of this movie, which kind of sucks because this I don't want to say I'm necessarily 100% upset that I missed out on the Blu-ray release, but it would be cool to have the release because it is limited and it is of an interesting movie. Either way, this movie has to do with a young priest who goes traveling with some fellow men of the cloth, and they encounter this old woman. They ask to stay at her farm, and the main character, he ends up getting kind of attacked by the old woman, and it turns out that she is a witch. After encountering this witch, he then returns to his home, his convent that he lives in, and he is then ordered to go to a small town out in the middle of nowhere, this small village, and essentially spend 3 nights saying prayers for the soul of a young woman who had been found dead in a field. And it turns out that this woman who he has to spend 3 whole nights in a church alone with the corpse of looks exactly like the witch he encountered. And that's essentially the whole setup to the movie. Is this priest having to spend 3 nights with the corpse of what you assume is the witch, and spooky stuff happens as a result. Now, I've known about this movie for quite a while. I've known about it before the Blu-ray release from Severin. But when I first heard about it, I had heard it was this very cool, creepy, well-paced, legitimately interesting, visually stunning, and even unintentionally comedic film. And it is, but I really don't want to say I didn't like this movie, because this movie is definitely has an atmosphere to it. It's definitely pretty entertaining and engaging and interesting, but the weird moments involving, demons and cool creature effects are very far and few from in between, resulting in the movie not being exactly what you expect from it, especially after watching like seeing a review for the film or watching clips or trailers for it. This movie definitely isn't what you 100% expect. It's kind of comparable to the second Coffin Joe film, This Night I'll Possess Your Corpse, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, mind you. How it is this creepy, relatively like slow-paced film that has these really strong moments of horror, and then there is a specific moment with the film V. It is like towards the last act, and with the second Coffin Joe film, it's like 3/4 of the way through. In the Coffin Joe film, it is the scene where Joe gets dragged down into hell, and the film goes to color and it's very visually interesting, and there's people stuck inside the walls of this sulfur cave getting tortured. It's very, very visually interesting and beautiful, and also just absolutely crazy for a movie from the 60s. And this film has has a few very similar moments to it, but I don't think I think the stuff that is in between those great moments is necessarily that good. Um, and I'm not trying to say this movie is bad and that I wouldn't recommend it, because this is a very interesting, very cool movie, honestly. Like, I'm going to give this movie a positive review. It's just, I don't think it necessarily lives up to its hype entirely. You know, after hearing a lot about this movie being one of the greatest kind of forgotten fantasy and or folk horror films ever made, it, it it's no Blood on Satan's Claw. It's no, you know, it's no This Night I'll Possess Your Corpse. It's no. I don't even know if I would say that this movie is as good as Black Sunday, because at least Black Sunday had a very consistent and interesting atmosphere, and didn't become unintentionally goofy and comedic like this film seems to become. You know, I haven't even really reviewed this, I'm just rambling. The acting in this film is relatively good. The main character is very charismatic and entertaining and interesting, and you definitely become kind of attached to him throughout the film. As you're watching, you want him to, you know, succeed in what he's trying to do, because you genuinely start to care about him, and you genuinely like this character. The character of the witch, she's pretty creepy, and in some of the scenes, she is pretty damn menacing. She's like equally menacing and beautiful. I the writing is fine, I guess. The pacing is fine. I didn't, like I said, I didn't find the in between, the scenes in between the spooky stuff isn't super engaging or interesting in my opinion, but it's not boring by any means. What there is of visual and practical effects and monster effects are very, very cool and well done, especially considering the era and considering that this film was made in the fucking Soviet Union in the 60s. You know, that's definitely an interesting interesting aspect to it. Shit, I don't know what else to say about this movie. It's a fucking movie, all right. This movie, you can find it on YouTube very easily. This movie has been uploaded to YouTube multiple times. The version I watched is cut by about 4 minutes from the full, like, length version of the film. But the full length version I found on YouTube didn't have subtitles, and it wasn't in English. And it was also only available in like 360p quality. One of the versions I found on YouTube was in like almost 720p quality. It was like 720p quality and had English subtitles. It was only cut by a few minutes, so I figured I'd just go with that version. Even then, this is still a very interesting movie, and definitely quite the folk horror, fantasy horror gem for a movie from the late 60s. You know, while I don't think it's as good as This Night I'll Possess Your Corpse, which again, you know, I find myself wanting to compare the two, because the two movies are very, very interesting, and they're very comparable in my opinion. They have aspects to them that I want to compare. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Yeah. Either way, this is apparently the first ever Soviet horror film, which is pretty damn cool, honestly. I know that there is a film from the 80s from Soviet Russia that is from Soviet Union that is that has a very, I can't remember what it's called, but I know I'm pretty sure it's an anthology film, and one of the segments of the anthology is based on a short story by, I think, Ray Bradbury, which that short story is definitely one I really like. I'm just rambling at this point. Uh, at the end of the day, I would definitely recommend this movie, although I wasn't the absolute 100% biggest fan of it. I'd probably have to give this movie like a 3.5, maybe a three and a half stars out of 5. It's definitely not perfect by any means, but it's got some really cool, very strong moments. And I feel like if I come back and rewatch this movie in a few years, I'll probably appreciate it more after watching it, after waiting a few years and rewatching it. Anyway, guys, that's it for this one. I just want to do a quick little review on this movie because it was pretty damn interesting. This is Biscuit Boo Horror Reviews, signing off. Peace.